There's a Bruce Springsteen lyric that goes, "Nothing illegal, just a little bit funny." That observation may apply to a little-known practice among some serving in Congress, having family members exchange donations with fellow candidates. Lauren, start by explaining how this works and what do these candidates actually do?
Sure. So the Federal Election Commission has limits on how much a particular person can give to a candidate. And a way...
What is the individual limit? Is $5,000, is it?
Currently, it's $5,400.
Okay. All right.
It raises every year, or every election cycle. Mm-hmm. And so say that a candidate's wife has already given the maximum amount to her husband. Through donation swapping, she can give to another candidate who promises to then give back the same amount to her husband's campaign.
Okay. All right. And then that's reciprocal with the other campaign, and it's kind of a, well, we'll get into that on what some people think of that and what the observations are. So your story this week focused on Democratic incumbent Scott Peters. We should note that his district includes Coronado, Poway, most of the northern part of San Diego, the city of San Diego. So how did you happen to focus on Peters?
I actually didn't make that decision. Back in May, I was doing some stories with election data, primarily on the presidential race and where or who San Diego County residents were donating to. And a reader emailed me and said I should look into Peters. Okay. So I did. Okay.
And tell us specifically now, how did this this swap work for the Peters campaign and another rep from the Bay Area, another fellow Democrat?
Yeah, so I was able to identify 21 exchanges in FEC data, and they are typically for the maximum amount, usually within a couple days of each other. And I noticed that the majority of those transactions were with Representative Ami Berra, up in the Bay Area, as you said, and his family members. And so it's a very difficult series of transactions to identify. But as an example, in 2015, March of last year, Representative Peters' wife and his mother-in-law donated the maximum amount to Peters' campaign.
Legal donations.
Legal donations. Yeah. And so under FEC rules, they wouldn't have been able to give any more to Peters' campaign. But during that election cycle, they also donated the maximum amount as well to Representative Ami Berra's campaign. And around that same time period, I believe it was within 10 days of each other, Representative Berra's parents donated the same amount back to Peters' campaign. And so on paper, it helps a candidate by making it appear, well, essentially they've raised more money than they otherwise would have been able to raise, but it also makes it appear that they have a longer list of supporters and that they're less reliant on their own wealth. Okay,
so it's beneficial for a number of aspects in terms of, hey, we're running a strong campaign here, we have money, and we have lots of people supporting us, and it looks that way. Now, we should note, again, these are legal campaign contributions, nothing illegal about donating to some representative in some other district in this state or elsewhere, right?
Perfectly legal. The FEC prohibits someone making a donation in the name of another person, but there's nothing wrong with saying, I'll give to you if you give to me. Okay.
And then again, we should, just to clarify this, and I know this gets complicated for a lot of people after Citizens United and all that's been spoken and written about campaign contributions in general, but these are individual limits. We can only say, as you say, $5,400. I like a particular candidate and I have that kind of money, I can write a check up to that amount. But if we're talking about PACs or people giving to the Republican or Democratic parties, those are unlimited in general, as long as they're not directly to a candidate's campaign.
Exactly. It's individual contributions from one person to a candidate's campaign.
Okay. Now, what does Scott Peters' campaign say about this whole practice and all?
They have said, they've reiterated that the donations are completely legal. And they also said that it's common. It's common for candidates to help each other, especially if they have the same goals or values politically. It's also common, they say, for these transactions to occur around the same time, usually at the end of a quarter, when a campaign is focusing on meeting its fundraising goals.
Saying, hey, we're raising this much money and we're this popular. Now, presume these are happen to be, Peters happens to have a wealthy family, no secret about that, and you have to have a certain amount as an individual, obviously, to write checks this big. Would other wealthy members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat, be doing the same thing? Do we know that? Is there a way to find that out?
In terms of the donor swapping with Peters and Representative Barra, there have been accusations that it involved other Democrats in Congress. But as far as I know, I haven't heard of any Republicans taking up the
So Darrell Issa, for example, who is also a wealthy member of Congress, it's unknown whether he is doing that sort of thing. Does this feel, Kate, does this feel unusual? As I said at the outset, nothing illegal, just a little bit funny?
Well, given that I used to live in Chicago, where all kinds of interesting political things happen, I guess it seems kind of par for the course to me. But. Well,
and I wanted to bring up here, and we have a little bit of information just generally that Peters district in 2014, when he ran against the Republican Carl DeMaio, it was one of the hottest contested in the country. Several $1 million of outside money came in, a lot of money raised by both campaigns in that district here. But it takes a lot of money to run for Congress now. Some of the figures that we came up with here, it's New York Times reporting in 2012 a House seat cost the victor an average of $1.6 million, twice as much as back in 1996. So, I mean, they spent a lot of time fundraising and coming up with creative ways to do it, right?
Mm-hmm. I didn't do a lot of reporting in terms of the fundraising strategy itself. I focused on these individual transactions and the donor swapping themselves. But through previous research and articles that I've written about campaigns and election cycles, I do know that a candidate usually spends a couple hours a day on the phone. Right, it's just the daily routine where they get a call sheet and they spend that time fundraising.
And you did talk to some groups who kind of analyze and observe politics and fundraising in this whole business here. What did they say about this?
The responses varied, usually depending on their political leaning. But both sides of this reiterated the fact that these are legal transactions, that it's technically a fundraising strategy. The more conservative groups were a little bit more critical and called upon some of the Democrats to give back some of the money or have accused them of using this donation swapping to bypass FEC limits.
Okay. All right. We're almost out of time. I'll give you a last word on this.
I was going to say, I just think it's a little interesting because if it is, I mean, looking at the family as a whole, basically a wash, right? There's pretty much equal amounts being swapped. So it really does come down to optics of this notion that someone is raising more money than maybe they are. I mean, if you're recruiting relatives, then sure, different relatives' accounts might be going up or down. But on the whole, it's kind of a wash. So it really is just about the visuals.
Well, we'll have plenty more reporting, I'm sure, as we move on toward November and the local, national, and state levels here.